back, everyone. This is episode 2 of our learning conference series, your go to guide to designing, running, and making the most of internal learning conferences. In our last episode, we talked about why companies are leaning into learning conferences and what makes them such a powerful tool. Today, we are getting hands on, starting right at the foundation, your learning conference blueprint. And just to start with, let's be really honest, running a conference just for employees can feel a little intimidating. We'll just think, will people show up? Will it drive real learnings? Or is it even worth it doing a learning conference? So, this episode is all about answering those questions and showing you how to design a conference that actually works. And to break it down, we have Ashwini with us, someone who helped several organizations reimagine their internal learning experiences. So, welcome back, Ashwini.
Thanks, Prachi. Great to be here. And yeah, after our first great session about why a learning conference is needed, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are excited to know about how do we set up and what do we start thinking about as we plan a learning conference. So I think that's a great segue into now designing or planning your conference and building a blueprint for a great learning conference.
Definitely. Ashwini, let's just start with the very beginning. Before jumping into speakers or tools, how should organizers think about their purpose?
Perfect. Yeah, Prachi, I think the purpose of organizing a learning conference is one of the key things. Like there could be hundreds of reasons why you could be running a learning conference. There are organizations who have one person learning departments, and there are organizations which have 100-member learning teams. So everyone runs and tries to achieve a different purpose for the conference. So, for example, the purpose could range from just bringing more alignment into your employees and aligning to the company goals and targets. Or it could be leadership development. So you have a tons of great leaders, middle managers who you want to coach for leadership development. Or it could be for bringing new technologies and making your teams aware about the new technologies which are there. Or the best way that we've seen is cross-functional learning. So let's say there are silos in the company. Usually in a bigger company, in an enterprise, you will see a lot of silos getting created. So it will be very helpful to have a conference which brings these people together. Just to share a small example and not going too deep into it, there we are working very closely with a Fortune 100 company, which is one of the largest media companies in the world. And they run learning conference. They run a 5-member learning conference. I think we talked about it in our episode 1 as well a little bit. The goal for that organization to run the learning conference is number one, to get leadership alignment so that all the leaders can talk and speak directly to the employees. And the number two is make employees aware about all the latest technologies which are available in the space. So it could be multifaceted as well. But the whole goal of a learning conference is to create, number one, the buzz, but at the same time, to align it to a hard metric. That could be employee learning or employees' growth or better understanding of overall employee goals.
I just love that example, Ashwini. That's such a powerful example about defining the purpose clearly before we start anything. So now that once you've talked about why, the next step that comes is the format. Many virtual, on demand, live, so many choices we have today. So, how should teams think about it?
Perfect. Yeah, Prachi. So once an organization has decided their purpose, now deciding the format will depend on a couple of things. Of course, number one is what kind of an organization it is. So basically, is the organization hybrid enabled, for example? Do employees work all the time in office or they are half the time working from home? Now, what is the content type, for example? Sometimes the purpose drives the format. Okay. So to give you an example here, again, if the goal is for leadership alignment and the organization is hybrid, you can have a hybrid event as well running it, where you have people who are coming in person, attend the sessions, attend the panels by the leadership in person, but at the same time, all of that is broadcasted live for everyone globally to listen as well. So before sharing more examples, let me talk about some of the most commonly used formats for a learning conference. So the first and the most commonly used that we've seen is live virtual. Because enterprises have multiple departments, multiple teams across the geographies, it's great to bring everyone together virtually. There are games, there are leaderboards, there are fun activities, there is leadership sessions, there are networking sessions. It's just a whole, you can say, an explosion of energy which is virtually presented. That's the most common that we've seen, at least in the post COVID era. The second one that we've seen, but with limited results, is on demand virtual. So you create a great session with the leaders or with the subject matter experts and then bring it onto the platform. Bring it for the teams to listen to it and asynchronously understand it. Then the third format, which we've seen happen, but in a much more smaller sessions or smaller audience base, is when these are in-person panels. So this could be, for example, a quarterly kickoff. This could be a team-specific planning. It could be a team-specific learning event. Like for example, Spotify, although they did this virtually, but I can share a great example with you. Spotify ran a L&D event on Airmeet for just their dev team. Now, the goal of that event was to make the devs aware of what's the latest technologies coming, what are the formats which Spotify uses. So that brings in tech from all over the world, which is Spotify employees, and just brings them on the same page and they hear directly from the leadership. So it could be those sessions as well. And then, of course, in person, completely in person, relevant for much smaller teams and does not really drive an ongoing engagement. But yeah, we've seen that as well come up. Between these five formats, we've seen 90% of L&D conferences. But given the trend right now, I would say that live and virtual has been the most strongest trend that we've been seeing of late. In fact, hybrid learning. So if you are interested, if an organization of a massive size is interested in making this virtual event a hybrid as well, we see that there's a Deloitte report from 2025 which shares that almost 80% of organizations are increasing their investments in virtual plus some physical capabilities to run learning conferences.
That 81% organization shift is great. And with platforms like Airmeet, you can even mix formats in one event: morning keynotes, afternoon workshops, and on demand catch ups in different formats, some being live, some being on demand basis of your global audience. Now, speaking of the audience and audience behavior, how do you recommend teams understand their learners better? Because employees aren't one size fit all.
Yep. Absolutely, Prachi. I think audience is the key here. Of course, nothing goes without the audience. In fact, if you were to restack this order, even maybe I would say audience goes above purpose as well, because you need to know your audience to be able to plan the learning conference. Usually, the way we've seen learning conferences are for everyone in the organizations, but then they have different content streams which are more personalized for different audiences in the organization. But again, we've seen this to be the biggest miss usually in planning your conference properly. And we will go into the content pieces as well to help you understand how different audiences need to be treated differently when you're planning a conference. But here, just the broader aspects of the conference in an enterprise, there could be several groups of audiences, several groups of employees. So, number one could be new joiners. So, we have Capgemini working with us very closely, who runs a monthly enablement and onboarding and learning event just for the new joiners. Then, second audience is your middle management, senior management. There could be audience, there could be events specifically done for them. There could also be an audiences which are specifically for on job, on ground team members, like field team forces, because they need constant upgradation in their skills, in their tactical knowledge in off the ground of what's happening. So it could be different aspects as well. And your content, learning conference content will vary according to that. So to summarize again, learners, where you focus very much on practical and relevant skill building. Leaders, where you focus primarily on inspiring vision, strategy, and then there could be cross team learning as well, where if there are design teams working, and if their design teams want to talk to marketing teams, or sales team wants to talk to the product team, it could be breaking silos as well. All of your content in the learning conference will be driven by who's your audience and what goal you want to achieve with that audience. So now, how do you gauge that, right? So because it's a big organization, how do you set that up? So surveys and pulse checks before you start planning your conference are a great way to know this. We've had one of our clients who ran a pre-event survey and poll asking, just okay, if we were to organize this conference, what would be the key takeaway? So responses directly help in building out the breakout sessions in the conference, or even inviting some of the guest speakers, because this is what people wanted to know. So the whole goal here is, as you set up this conference, get employees, get your team members early into the whole planning phase, so that you can then make content, plan the conference more appropriately for them.
I think such a smart move, and it shows respect to the employees' time as well, because you are asking them what they are looking forward to from the event. Now,
Yeah.
moving ahead, it ties into my next question. Let's talk about designing the attendee journey. I feel like this is where a lot of conferences either win or lose the game. So, Ashwini, what are your thoughts around this?
Again, Prachi, 100%, I cannot agree more with you. This has been one of the key aspects where any event experts help and work closely. For example, Airmeet has worked with a lot of clients, and this is specifically where we help and provide our expertise on what to do in a conference to primarily break down the journey of an attendee. There are three parts to it. Okay. One, we call it everything is pre-event. Then something that we call is in-event, that is happening during the event. And then something that we call it post-event, which is happening after the event. So the goals, and now again, based on your audience, based on your goals, you have to design a pre-event experience, pre-conference experience, which starts from building anticipation. People should get excited about this, right? People should get excited about who are going to be speaking, what are going to be the type of sessions, what is the topics which are going to be discussed. They should start feeling excited about it. We have seen organizers run, of course, service is very common, but they also run some promotions. They also run some programs where, okay, they're running some games. Okay, who does the biggest promotions, who is most loudest evangelist for the event, they get some prizes during the when the event is hosted. They run some trivia quizzes leading up to the event, so that you're now building more and more engagement around that conference. And like we said, the whole purpose of organizing a learning conference is because in the day-to-day work, team members, employees, even the most dedicated employees do not get the time to focus on their learning outcomes. So bringing them together in a conference for 5 days, for 4 days, is easier to get the learnings going on. So therefore, you want to get them excited and give them a reason to be here. That's what all happens in pre-event, pre-conference. During event, now depending on how long your conference is, we've seen conferences running from 1 day to even spanning over 5 days. And some of the bigger companies, as big the companies, they will probably run it longer just to have more visibility and more speakers involved. So during conference, now this is where it make or break happens, because if you get the attendees, if you get your employees, but if they're not engaged, if the experience is very bland, if they're used to doing Zoom calls or Microsoft Team calls and the experience is the same, it'll just feel like the same. So that's where I think platforms like Airmeet shine a lot, where you have specialized engagement tools, where you have polls, where you have live Q&As, where you have networking tables, where you can play trivia's games during the sessions, where you can have live DJ playing in the event, where you can have a leaderboard, so just a slight competitive spirit. So make it as engaging as possible, so that there's always something happening, and then that keeps employees engaged. They want to be in the event, but they don't want the monotony of just sitting in a regular Teams call
Yeah.
and just listening to everyone, right? This is where really the success of the conference is decided. And then, of course, post conference, post event. This is where we've seen L&D folks who've not run events a lot usually not think about it really well. So this is where now you need to start working on personalized highlights, personalized summary clips, personalized notes for the sessions which every attendee attends. And this is where you sit with your analytics team and start churning out, understanding out data. What happened? Who engaged? Who were not engaged? Now you're planning your next event, but understand, take learnings from here. So there are two key aspects of post event then. Figure out all the content, all the engagement that you saw. How do you leverage it further so that it's a continuous learning? But at the same time, also see what you can do from the data that you have.
I really like the way you called out the personalized highlights and follow ups. And to
Yeah.
extend the life of the conference, it really helped. Now,
Mhm.
moving ahead to the tech side of it. Honestly, I
Yeah.
feel like the platform you choose for doing your learning conferences either amplifies or limit your design. So, what should organizers look for it, Ashwini?
100% Prachi. Again, just talking through our stack, it drives from your purpose. Where are your audience? Where are your attendees? Where are your audience going to be joining from? Where are they based? And then, of course, what kind of an experience you want to create for them? Is it something that they will really engage with and it'll be a wow experience, or is this something which is just a checklist item where you can just strike it off your item? So if you really are looking for something which is more engaging, which is something where which is more immersive for the audience, I think then there are specialized platforms which helps you create multiple agendas, which help you create multiple tracks for different types of learners that we talked about, different types of audiences within an enterprise that we talked about, create gamified experiences for them. So there are platforms like Airmeet who do it really well. But again, if your conference format is more around, okay, it's a checklist item, just get it done with, it's a very regular workshop, not you're not looking for any specific outcomes, then you have very plain vanilla horizontal platforms who run this experience as well. But again, tech stack should be, there are two things that you need to keep in mind as you're choosing your tech stack. Number one is they should be great experience away from something which employees are very regular and used to doing, because this has to feel special for them to now get excited about it. This has to feel different from their day-to-day monotonous Microsoft team calls. So number one is the craft and experience which is slightly special, number one, I would say. But at the but that the second part is it should not be super complicated that you as a learning conference host or an organizer just get overwhelmed with the details. So I would say look for certain types of features which enable networking, which enable engagement, which enable connecting, RTMP streams, replay options. But at the same time, don't miss out on. At the same time, it's easy enough that you can create it yourself, or a couple of your team and you together can host a big conference. It is easy enough to pull out data. It is easy enough to set up information. It is easy enough for attendees to jump on directly and join. They don't have to download anything new to be able to do it. So I would recommend going into a proper due diligence, run a small test, couple of test events before choosing a platform if you don't already have a platform. If you do have the budget, then explore what other things are possible along with that platform to enable a great experience. So I would say, Prachi, this decision process, of course, drives from all the things that we've talked about till now. But at the same time, this is one of the key pieces of the whole puzzle, because if the platform where you're hosting it is not really good, is not really exciting for the people who are attending, then you lose all that energy that you've built over time in the process.
That's so true, Ashwini, and very well explained. So I think to our audience as well, it gives so much of a clear picture that tech isn't just about logistics. It's more about a learning experience for the employees to build in that complete engagement during the whole event with the different available features within the tool that they can utilize. Now, finally, let's talk about the content design. What would be your advice here to our audience?
Okay, now this is where after the platform, now how you pace your content. So of course, content will vary as your goals and as your audiences differ. But how do you pace your content? So I would rather comment about the content pacing, because content design, I think as a learner, as a learning manager, you would know how to design great content. But what we've seen and can share it from our experience is that two, three things. The number one is momentum. How do you pace the content in a conference? So number one is usually you start strong. You can then peak in the middle, which is slightly more where it's more specific to the people work, and then close with inspiration. Close with inspiration and fun, for example. So that's how we usually pace an organization. So if it's a 4 day conference, if it's a 3 day conference, then you start day one with keynotes, with leadership sessions. Middle, that is day 2 and 3, is where you then bring in some external speakers, you bring in some experts, you bring in some marquee names, so that now people, now the once the that is start, then the marquee names come, where now it's the learning part which comes in. And the last day 4, day 5, is where it's more around just inspiration, looking forward, and then the fun aspect as well. There could be games, there could be trivia. That's where people are now taking away a positive note on everything, on the full conference. Relevance, of course, personalize, as much personalized as you can, as much as possible, because in an enterprise you have different types of, or different types of employees. There are leadership man, there are middle management, there are new joiners, there are learners, there are people in different journeys. So have a multi-track approach which helps you create sessions aligning to specific goals of your attendees. That could be something as well. Now another thing about content design is, so what learning conferences do really well is they time box the employees. Okay, so you are time boxed for, let's say, 3 days. 3 days, 5 hours each, where you are learning something and you're actively, because otherwise it's hard to get 1 hour a week from an employee to focus on the learning outcomes or learning approaches. So typically, what we suggest, or what we've seen our organizers do, is number one, do not cram everything up in one day. Okay. So that will just create an overload. Day two, employees just go back to being their usual self. Create it as an experience. So make it multi days. So make it 5 days, make it even 3 days, 4 days, 5 days is what we've seen ideal, where you run a half a day learning. So every day, the second half for everyone is booked. And that's when they're learning, they're networking, they're engaging with other team members. So that's what we've seen really well. Spread it out over multiple days. Make it not full days on any of those days. Make it half days, or make it 60% of the day, so that they have time to take breaks. They have time to go back to their regular important work as well. Do it about twice a year is what we recommend. We've seen companies do it quarterly as well. But depending on your org size, depending on what is your audience going to be like, if there are going to be regional audiences joining in, then maybe do it specifically on their time zones as well. But otherwise, we've seen, especially when the senior leadership is speaking, usually everyone is available at that time. There's also another trend that we've seen is what we call replay the same session in a different time zone at a different time. So those also scenarios are possible. So design it keeping your goals and your audience in mind. Many different approaches work. Of course, there's no one single approach which is the best fit. Every organization arrives at their best solution. So we would recommend doing it like that. But happy to talk about more about what format can work for what kind of an organization, if that's something interesting for our audience to listen to as well.
Definitely, Ashwini. So, this was the last topic for our today's session. So, just to summarize before we wrap up, we need to start with a clear purpose, then understand our audience deeply, followed by blending the format for the engagement. If you want to go for a hybrid format, virtual format, what works best for you, then mapping the full attendee journey, picking the tech that works for you, which is an important part of it, and
Yeah.
at the end, crafting the content that inspire the actions of your learners. So, Ashwini, anything I might have missed or any final thoughts before we wrap up this blueprint episode?
Oh no, Prachi, that was an amazing summarization. So yeah, absolutely. Just to again reiterate what you summarized, think of this as an end-to-end experience where you are bringing in learners to learn. So that way you are crafting an experience for them with that purpose. So think of this like that as an experience rather than just a one-off event. Would be a great segue to then start building the hype, start building the in conference experience, and then of course following it up with multiple offshoots of content engagement going on. Yeah.
Thank you, Ashwini, for these insights. I would say perfect note to end on. And to everyone tuning in, start sketching your blueprint today. In the next episode, we are diving into building the pre event buzz, how to make your employees genuinely excited to attend these learning conferences. So, see you there in the next episode.
Thanks, Prachi. Looking forward to that.